Greetings, everyone. My name is Bug Business, and today I'm going to be discussing my top 3 favorite episodes of My Little Pony Season 6. These are the top 3 episodes that I believe were the best well written, best well executed, had the best character moments, and were overall the best enjoyable episodes overall. Of course, you don't have to agree with these, but again, these are my opinions. So, with that out of the way, let's get to it. Coming in at number 3, Buckball Season. Now, this is particularly interesting as I'm not even a particular fan of sports, but overall, the execution of this episode was what made it on this list. So, unlike the card before the ponies, I felt the execution of the characters interacting with each other was way better handled here. So, just to make a quick comparison, I do believe that the reasonings, at least for Rainbow Dash and Applejack, who are also in this episode, did make sense in the cart before the ponies. However, I do believe the counterpoint or the reaction of Scootaloo is what made that episode so much more difficult to watch. Here we get to see a reaction that not only makes sense, but is probably one of the best moments of the season, which is Fluttershy's reaction to being overworked and being overtrained and being put in a situation that she doesn't want to be in. She steps up, she tells it how it is, and it allows the episode to convey a message way more smoothly on top of actually telling us who was victorious in the end, unlike the cart before the ponies. And it allowed, of course, Snails to have his moment to shine, which was interesting to say the very least. On top of that, it was just an enjoyable episode on the basis of it sort of flipping the script over instead of being a sort of jealousy episode. It was sort of that overworking, sort of competitive episode where, we get to see Applejack and Rainbow Dash step aside and let the other two, being Fluttershy and Piggy Pie, take the reins in the competition and allowing them the opportunity to compete in a way that just feels right. So that is why I placed Buckball Season at my number 3 pick. Coming in at number 2 is Spice Up Your Life. Now, admittedly, at first glance, I actually didn't like this episode, and I couldn't ever place why that was. I just didn't know why, so I decided to give it a little bit of time, give it a little bit of thought, and then I decided to analyze it a bit deeper. And to me, this is one of Rarity's best written episodes I think I've ever seen. Now, at first glance, after seeing some reviews, and I won't call out, call out anyone since I actually don't even remember who said that Rarity was sort of written like a hypocrite here, I don't think that's true. No, there's a comparison to another episode where Rarity is dealing with supply and demand and creativity and all that. I don't remember which episode it was, but the first thing to note is that this is not the same job. Now, typically, at least for me, when I try to do a different job, I try to look at it from a different point of view. That's just natural for me to see what works better for whatever situation I am in. So, with that being said, the situation that Rarity is in here is severely different than the previous episode. Here, she's more of a supervisor and she's trying to do what's best for someone else instead of herself. and she sees that these ponies are looking to get the 3 stars, and she's aware of this critic and she's aware of her style. So she's trying her best to satisfy this critic so that they can get the 3 stars. It makes sense. And on top of that, there's also something else to consider. Let's say, hypothetically speaking, that Rarity was successful. Rarity did the transformation, everything changed. Pinkie Pie didn't mess with her in the ingredients part. And the critic came in, tasted the food, gave it the 3 stars, and then left. Well, there's literally nothing stopping them from turning the store back afterwards, right? So, even under that circumstance, Rarity's still in the right here. But it goes even further than that. You see, Rarity's parallel to Pinkie Pie in this episode is what makes it stand out so well, as Rarity is technically right, as I've been saying, but she's right for the wrong reasons. And Pinkie Pie's actions are wrong, but for the right reasons. This parallel is so interesting, and the dynamic here is just so well handled. And I really enjoy that really small detail that allows us to see that Rarity is right. And it comes from Pinkie Pie's perspective, actually. And that's when the ponies ask Pinkie Pie about the store's stars. And when they say it's 0, they walk away, indicating that by all means, Rarity's right in this situation, not wrong. And after doing that whole screw up, it it does come on both of them, but Rarity decides to switch it up because she understands how to switch it up. She understands how to figure things out in such a way that would best still suit this place. And after telling the critic off and all that stuff. On top of that, the song's pretty solid. I enjoyed the song here. Uh, the duality between Rarity and Pinkie Pie is so significant and so well handled here. It is unbelievable. And I think it was a bit overlooked by even some reviewers here. But of course, as I said earlier, I wouldn't call any of them out because I don't remember who said Rarity was a hypocrite. So there's that. Anyways, this episode is fantastic. It is just really well handled. Again, for me, one of Rarity's best episodes. And if you were someone who did say that Rarity was a hypocrite, I would highly recommend at least watching it again from this new perspective. I think it will change the outlook of this entire episode. It did for me, and it might do it for you too. So that is why Spice Up Your Life made it to the number 2 spot. And my number 1 pick, The Times They Are Changing. I'm going to agree with the Watchel Pony. That is a shout out, so I'll leave a link in the description to his channel, but nonetheless, this is just another prime example of why I believe that Spike is one of the best written characters of season 6 altogether. Fluttershy being a close second, and the only reason why I would place her second is actually because of 28 Pranks Later, but that's a story for another time. Anyways, Spike is really well handled here. His relationship with Thorax is just, it makes sense. There's elements that help build this episode beforehand and afterhand that makes this episode a complete bridge, unlike the Gauntlet of Fire. Again, Gauntlet of Fire being a fantastic episode that just doesn't have a follow up quite yet. So, this episode's just well written, well executed. The pacing for the majority of the episode is just really well handled. The only two issues were minor nitpicks at the very end of the day, and coming with that small montage, and then that song's pacing can be a hit or miss on depending on how you see it. So, with that out of the way, again, this episode's just fantastic. There's just not much to say about it because of how great it is, and that's usually a good thing, I think. Um, I can't stress enough how well the characters are portrayed here. Uh, the relationship, as I said, I actually do think that the Lyra revealed story was pretty well handled, especially for the ending. And the ending is actually the reason why I place this up my number one, but I'll get to that in a little bit. But first, I'm going to talk about the song. Now, the song is, from what I've seen from at least other reviewers, split about half and half, I would want to say. Again, that's just from a quick glance from what I could see from the reviewers that I watch, but I tend to lean toward liking the song. Now, there is one thing I will talk about, and that's the placement of the song. I don't think that's a proper excuse to say the song comes out of nowhere. I don't think that's a good enough excuse to hate the song. Now, if you just hate the song for being whatever, then that's fine, but the placement of the song being out of nowhere, I feel like that's an extremely weak excuse, as most musicals, including in My Little Pony, but most musicals tend to just come out of nowhere. It sort of has become the trope of what a musical number is. It's something that sort of comes out of nowhere and sort of just ends. Most songs in My Little Pony function that way. There are probably less examples of songs that sort of key into a good moment of a song, if that makes any sense. Uh, so yeah. Anyways, I thought the song was good enough. But the moment that the song ended, this is the moment that I believe that made this episode my number one. And that's when the ponies, uh, supposedly forgave Thorax for whatever he did. I guess forgiveness for the Lyra revealed part. Um, I've seen reviewers say that the whole forgiveness thing comes too quick. And a part of me says, what's wrong with that? And now I'm going to come up with an example that might, I don't know, hurt my reputation, as if I even had one to begin with, but hey, I actually like Batman versus Superman's handling of forgiveness a lot better than uh, Cap's willingness to fight. Uh, I mean, Iron Man's willing to fight Cap. If I said that in reverse, I apologize. But yeah, I have a tendency to lean towards forgiveness because I like the more difficult decision of the two. Uh, discussing Batman versus Superman is an entirely different review in its own right. And if you do want to see me review that entire movie on this channel, Well, you could probably go on my Patreon and support me and say, hey, review Batman versus Superman, and I'll get on that. But until then, like I said, I think the forgiveness part is well handled, but I don't think that's everything that's happening in this scene. As who is being forgiven here? I mean, Thorax, I guess, for again the whole liar revealed part, but that's so minor. It's such a minor part of what's going on here. I mean, we visually see him during the invasion. He says that he was there, and we visually see him there not doing anything wrong. So we as the audience know that he hasn't done anything wrong until supposedly the liar revealed part, which again, I don't think is the worst part of the whole thing. However, there is another part of this whole forgiveness thing, and it actually comes from Shining Armor. He's the one who apologizes, actually, if you noticed it. He's the one who says, I'm sorry. Now, does Thorax even say, I forgive you? No, he doesn't. It's actually the reverse if you're looking at what the forgiveness is actually referring to. It's actually more focused on Shining Armor as far as what's being said. But there's an element on top of that as well. It's not so much about the forgiveness for me. That's not what made this moment what it is. It was about trusting Spike at his, well, song, not at, instead of at his word, which I guess is a preferred style that some reviewers would have liked to have seen. But regardless, this to me was more about trust rather than forgiveness. And that to me is what defines this entire episode. It is about trust. And trust these days is something incredibly hard to come by with what has been going on. This episode is so relevant and it has so much packed in that one moment. It is unbelievable how much is going into that one minor bit. It is significant, it is meaningful, it is just a moment that defines My Little Pony. It is probably one of the most grown up things I've seen in the show. And again, it comes from trusting Spike. I think that is what tops the forgiveness for me is the willingness to trust Spike at his word. And it came through, it followed through in the season finale as in the middle of the road I thought that season finale was, it still allowed for Thorax to be, that sort of more sly version of himself. And, you know, even if comes down to if it was just Shining Armor forgiving him, Thorax that being, uh, I also find that just as justifiable, anyways. And it comes down to the season finale and Shining Armor as a character. First, in the season finale, he doesn't even do anything, and that sort of ties in directly into the next point of Shining Armor is a secondary character. If he hadn't forgiven Thorax uh, here, I don't think it would make that much chance to carry on past the season finale, where again he just doesn't even do anything. So it would be even more awkward. It would just come off as awkward now that everything's out of the way, which is why I decided to wait so long in deciding my top three. I think the season finale really helped finalize this episode and everything in it, every element, even when Spike decided to back down because he was a child, well, he's still considered a child, at least in the show. He backed down because he was surrounded by everyone else who was disagreeing with him. Even that moment, it felt right. Nothing felt out of place. Nothing felt wrong here on a major scale. Again, the only things I could find was one minor nitpick and one that I feel is a bit even unjustified, with the whole pacing of the song and ending. I feel that the ending of this episode is actually what elevates it again to my number one spot. So that was my top three episodes of My Little Pony Season 6. And if you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, farewell, everyone.